Welcome, welcome, welcome. Welcome to Dave's Spooky Stories. I'm your host, Dave. Tonight we're featuring a collection of 5 UFO stories. Please like and subscribe and comment below. Let me know what you'd like for future topics. Story number 1, Uncle Mike and Tom Jones. Uncle Mike was the kind of guy who could tell you his pancake recipe was passed down by ancient druids, and you'd still find yourself nodding along. Not because you believed him, but because his delivery was so good. Mike didn't just tell stories. He lived them, breathed them, and embellished them to the point that even fiction writers would call his bluff. But then there was the Tom Jones story. That one, as absurd as it sounded, came with a kind of indisputable fact Uncle Mike rarely had to back up his claims: a multi-million-dollar lottery win. He told me the story one lazy Sunday afternoon, the kind where the clock barely moves and the coffee tastes better than it has any right to. He leaned back in his squeaky recliner, a sly grin on his face, and launched into his tale without preamble. You know, some folks dream of angels, right? Guiding them, all ethereal, clouds and harps and all that stuff. He chuckled, taking a slow sip of his root beer. Not me. I get Tom freaking Jones. Yep, that Tom Jones. Smooth as butter, with a voice straight out of heaven, or maybe outer space. I haven't decided yet. I raised an eyebrow. He had my attention. It was the night before the draw, he continued, tapping his fingers rhythmically on the armrest like he was trying to conjure a beat. I was in that half-sleep, half-awake state, you know. Anyway, I could see the silver cloud, all luminous, descending right into my living room, and then standing on it, bathed in this ridiculous spotlight, is Tom freaking Jones. Not an alien, Tom Jones. Not some weird green thing with his face glued on. Just Tom Jones. Charisma spilling out of his pores. Wearing the kind of suit that says, "I'm here to blow your mind." And boy, did he deliver. Uncle Mike paused, clearly enjoying my skeptical silence. Then he mimicked the microphone in his hand and started humming the tune to "It's Not Unusual." He couldn't hold a note to save his life, but the effort was nothing short of entertaining. "So there he is," Mike continued, "on this magical cloud, belted out 5 numbers. No fanfare, no explanation, just singing. I remember it like it was yesterday. He'd hit each note perfectly, and with each number, the cloud glowed a little brighter. He didn't give me the Powerball number, though. Mike shrugged theatrically, but then he winked and said, "In this, I'll swear on the grave of Elvis. 5's more than enough, Mike. 5's more than enough." Just like that. That's what he said. And then poof, he vanished. I couldn't help but laugh, shaking my head at the sheer audacity of the tale. "That's the dream?" I asked. "Tom Jones serenading you with lottery numbers?" "That's the dream. That's the dream," he said with mock seriousness, holding up his hand as though taking an oath. "Not a single alien abduction involved, thank you very much." Now, if that had been the entire story, I'd have chalked it up to Uncle Mike's usual flair for the dramatic. But when those 5 numbers showed up in the exact order during the draw, and when Uncle Mike walked away with enough millions to buy every tie-dye Elvis mug in the world, the tale took on a life of its own. "Of course no one believed me," he said, leaning forward as though confiding a great secret. "I told the guys at the bar, told your aunt, told the cashier at the gas station. They all said, 'Mike, you finally lost it. Must have been the Jack Daniels talking.' But I'm telling you, dream or divine intervention, or alien karaoke. I heard those numbers, clear as day. I didn't know whether to be fascinated or incredulous. It was classic Uncle Mike. Impossible to dismiss, and somehow just possible enough to make you wonder. The public record didn't lie. He really had won that week, and yet it was Mike's knack for exaggeration, and let's be honest, deflection, that made everything he said feel like an elaborate joke. Every so often, someone would call him out. Why not just admit you picked random numbers, Mike? And he'd smile, sip his root beer, and say, because they weren't random. Tom Jones gave them to me. Believe it or don't, makes no difference to me. I think he liked the mystery. He liked knowing there was a sliver of doubt hanging over his story, keeping it alive in people's minds. It was part of his magic. The way he could weave tall tales and let them linger just enough to stick. Whether you believed him didn't matter. He was playing for entertainment, not credibility. But I'll admit, there's a part of me that wonders, could dreams hold truths we don't understand? Story number 2, Neighbors. The evening air was thick with the sweet and earthy scent of the cornfields. Walking the fence row, I felt the rhythm of the land under my boots, a quiet reassurance in the deepening twilight. Grandpa's old Sears 22 rested on my shoulder, the stock smooth and familiar in my grip. It wasn't much of a gun by today's standards, but to me, it was a piece of family history. As much a part of my childhood as the dells in the distance and the rows of corn that swayed golden green in the breeze. I was out doing what I always did when the world felt just a little too big, plinking at branches and imagining myself as some kind of hero, aiming at the shadows that the setting sun cast along the ground. I lined up a shot at a thin branch hanging stubbornly low from a tree just off the fence row. The crack of the shot echoed once, and the branch danced, a satisfying snap splitting the silence. It was right then, as the echoes faded, that I saw it. At first, it was just a shining bit of sunlight catching the edge of something metallic. It hung in the air over the cornfields, shimmering against the backdrop of the dells, which loomed dark and jagged in the distance. I froze, eyes narrowing, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. The thing, whatever it was, hovered just above the tassels of the corn. It seemed small, maybe 3 feet across, or maybe smaller. It was hard to tell. It shimmered and shifted, almost like it didn't want to settle on a single size or shape. It wasn't making a sound, not a hum, not a whoosh, nothing. Just gliding silently over the swaying corn. My heart started pounding, a deep, insistent rhythm that I felt in my fingertips as they gripped the worn wood of Grandpa's rifle. The sphere moved with a deliberate grace, dipping slightly to follow the gentle curve of the land. It didn't move like any plane or drone I'd ever seen. It was too smooth, too precise, like it had a mind of its own. My first thought wasn't wonder or curiosity. It was something primal, a flicker of fear that turned into a spark of action. My hands tensed on the rifle, and before I could stop myself, I raised it to my shoulder, the front sight lining up with the floating sphere. For a moment I just stood there aiming. The thought that ran through my head was pure instinct. Could I shoot it? Could I bring it down? But as quickly as that thought came, another replaced it. What if shooting at it made it angry? What if it wasn't something I could fight? What if? What if? What if it wasn't even from this world? Just as my finger brushed the trigger, the sphere moved. Not like a startled bird or a deer spooked by hunters' footsteps, but with a purpose, like it knew what I was thinking. It darted forward, gliding low over the tassels, heading straight for the Hargroves' place. The Hargroves? My stomach nodded as I thought about them. They'd always been an odd bunch, keeping to themselves more than most folks around here. People in town whispered about them. Nothing mean, just observations that they didn't seem quite like everybody else. The way they spoke, slow and measured, like they were weighing each word. The way they seemed to know things they shouldn't, like the weather, or who'd win the next county fair pie contest. Maybe it was all just gossip, or maybe not. I lowered the rifle, watching the sphere as it skimmed over the corn, its metallic surface catching the last rays of the setting sun. It moved with such precision, weaving through the rows as if it had been doing this for centuries. My eyes followed it all the way to the edge of the field, where the Hargroves' property began. And then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, it was gone, swallowed up by the shadow of their barn. For a long moment, I just stood there, my heart pounding, my thoughts racing. What had I just seen? Was it a machine? Something alive? The questions piled up, each one more impossible than the last. It was only when I started walking back along the fence row that I noticed the stillness. The air was heavy, the usual hum of insects and distant calls of birds strangely absent. It was as if the world itself was holding its breath. And then, in the distance, I saw him. A figure was walking the road that joined our farms, just at the edge of where the fields met the gravel. Even from far away, I could tell it was Mr. Hargrove. He moved slowly, almost methodically, and there was something in his hand, a long, glinting object that caught the dying light like a blade, or a rifle. I stopped in my tracks, watching him as he disappeared down the road. The knot on my stomach tightened. The Hargroves had always been a mystery, but now they felt like something more. Something other. The thought that ran through my head was one I didn't want to believe, but it lodged itself there all the same. What if they weren't just odd? What if they weren't just private? What if they weren't human? I turned back toward home, Grandpa's rifle resting heavy in my hands. The Dells loomed in the distance, their shadows stretching long and dark over the fields. And somewhere, hidden in the folds of the land, the answers waited. Story number 3. The Encounter in the Field of Daisies. The wind was soft that day. It pushed the kite gently, lifting it higher with each gust. My hands gripped the spool tightly. The red string stretched into the sky, holding the kite aloft. It was made from scrap cloth, stitched together last winter. Father said it was a waste of time, but Mother just smiled. She knew I loved the sky. The field was full of daisies. Yellow centers with white petals swayed all around me. Their scent mixed with the clean smell of fresh earth. Barefoot, I felt the cool dirt under my toes. It grounded me, even as my eyes stayed fixed on the kite above. I was alone. No one could see me from the barn. No one could hear me laugh when the wind carried the kite higher than ever before. And then I saw it. A flash in the corner of my eye. Not bright like lightning, but soft, glowing. I turned my head and froze. There, above the trees, hung a disk, white as the clouds, but somehow brighter. It seemed to pulse, like it was breathing. It wasn't large, maybe the size of Father's wagon. It hovered there, silent and still. I let the spool drop. The kite sank lower, but I didn't care. My eyes locked on the disc. It didn't move, just hung there, suspended in the air. I could see the edges clearly, smooth and round. The glow was steady, but not harsh, almost gentle, like it was waiting. Fear prickled my skin. Was it watching me? Was it dangerous? I thought about running. My feet wouldn't move. The daisies whispered around me, bending in the breeze. I stood still as stone. The disc shifted. It tilted slightly, as if turning its face toward me. I gasped. It wasn't just an object. It felt alive. The air grew thick, heavy. My chest tightened. I wanted to scream, but no sound came. My thoughts raced. What was it? Why was it here? Was it God's work? Or the devil's? Then it started to rise. Slowly, it climbed higher into the sky. Its glow softened as it ascended. The pulsing grew faint. I watched, unable to look away. It drifted up, above the tops of the pines. Higher, higher. And then it was gone. The sky was empty again. The daisies danced as though nothing had happened. The kite lay crumpled on the ground, its tail curled like a sleeping cat. My hand shook. My heart hammered in my chest. I stood there for what felt like hours. The wind cooled my cheeks, brushing away the heat of fear. Finally, I picked up the spool. The string tangled, limp and lifeless. I tucked the kite under my arm. Slowly, I walked back to the barn. I didn't tell anyone. Not Father, not Mother. They would laugh. They would say I imagined it, that the sun had played tricks on me. But I knew the truth. It was real. It had been there, watching. To this day, I wonder, why did it come? What did it want? Will it come back? Sometimes late at night, I lie awake and think about the glow. I think about the way it tilted, as if looking at me. And I wonder if somewhere, out there, beyond the stars, something is wondering about me too. Story number 4. John's Tale. It wasn't the first time we made the pilgrimage to Bass Lake in search of a perfect launch point for our boat, but it was the first time we'd truly sat down with old John. The ritual was always the same. We'd pull up to his ramshackle property, tucked among the towering white pines that leaned against the water like they were trying to get a better view. A battered aluminum dock jutted up from the shore, a relic of more prosperous years, or at least the sturdier ones. And John, sunken into a plastic lawn chair that looked like it had given up on life, would wave us over with the slow, deliberate movement of a man who knew time owed him no favors. For a 12-pack of Pabst Blue Ribbon, he'd let us use his dock. We'd been coming here for years, launching our small fishing boat into the lake's glassy waters under his bleary gaze. John's cheeks were permanently ruddy, his hands perpetually shaky, and his voice had a gravelly edge that spoke of cigarettes and whiskey, or maybe just the erosion of decades. He never asked for anything more than beer. He didn't even ask for that. But we gave it to him. That fall day, something in the air felt different. After dropping off the beer, we lingered near his dock, chatting about the weather and the changing leaves. John seemed unusually talkative, gesturing us over with one hand while clutching a Pabst with the other. He patted the bench next to him, a warped old plank of wood that sagged in the middle. "Come on," he said, his words slurred but steady. "You boys ever hear about the thing I saw out there duck hunting? It ain't your usual tall tale." We exchanged a glance. Duck hunting stories were practically a religion up here, but John's tone had a gravity to it that demanded attention. Curiosity, or maybe politeness, compelled us to sit down. He cracked another beer, offered one to us, which we declined. He took a pull from his beer and then began to tell a story. "It was late November," he said, staring out at the lake like he was searching for the past. "Cold as hell, you know. The kind of cold that sticks to your bones, no matter how many layers you wear. I was out here before the sunrise. Decoys already in the water, shotgun loaded, waiting for the ducks to fly in. It was one of those mornings where the fog hangs low, makes everything feel eerie." He paused to take another sip, the sound of the beer can crunching in his grip, breaking the quiet. "Then I saw it," he said, his voice dropping lower, "right above the lake. At first I thought it was a helicopter, maybe the DNR checking our hunters. But this thing, it wasn't moving like no helicopter I ever seen. It was quiet, you know, dead quiet, just hovering there, a shape against the sky." "What kind of shape?" I asked, feeling like the air had grown heavier. John squinted, trying to recall every detail. "Round, like a saucer, shiny, with lights that weren't natural. Not headlights, not spotlights. They glowed soft, like they were alive. I could feel it, too. Not just see it. It was like, I don't know, electricity in the air. I swear the damn thing was looking at me, even though it didn't have eyes." I glanced at my friend, who was shifting uncomfortably on the bench. The story was absurd, but the way John told it, the tremor in his voice, the faraway look in his eyes, made it impossible to dismiss. "Then it started moving," John continued, waving his hand in slow, deliberate arc to illustrate the motion. "Not flying like an airplane, no jerking movements like a helicopter. Smooth, deliberate, like it was gliding. It came down closer to the water, almost like it wanted to touch it, and then it stopped again. I could see my breath in the air, but it felt like time stopped." "What did you do?" my friend asked, leaning forward. "What the hell could I do?" John shot back, raising his eyebrows. "I was just a guy with a shotgun. You think I was going to take aim at something like that?" He shook his head, letting out a bitter laugh. I just sat there, frozen, watching it. Then it shot up, straight into the sky and disappeared. I mean, gone. No sound, no trail, nothing. Just the stars looking back at me." The silence that followed was thick, almost oppressive. Bass Lake stretched out before us, the surface calm and still like it was holding its breath. "Did you tell anyone?" I asked finally. "Course not," John muttered, taking another swig of beer. "Who'd believe me? People already think I'm just some old drunk with too many stories. You tell folks you saw a UFO, they'll laugh you right out of town. Hell, maybe I didn't even see anything. Maybe I had one too many pulls off my flask. But I know what I felt. That thing, it wasn't from around here. It wasn't from anywhere, I know. He leaned back in his chair, the story seeming to drain him of whatever energy he'd mustered. Folks come and go, talk about aliens and government cover-ups, but me? I just keep my mouth shut and my head down. Except to you boys. You brought the beer after all. We sat there a while longer, the conversation meandering back to mundane things, fish, hunting, the weather. But the story lingered, hanging in the air like the fog John had described. Whether it was truth or fantasy, it had left an imprint on all of us. When we finally launched our boat and paddled out into the lake, I couldn't help but glance up at the sky, half expecting to see something gliding between the stars. John's dock, his story, and his beer. All pieces of a puzzle I'd probably never solve. But sometimes, late at night, when the world grows quiet and the sky seems particularly vast, I wonder if he saw something out there, duck hunting in the fog, and I wonder if one day I might see it too. Story number 5, The Glow Below. The St. Croix River was always my sanctuary. After decades of chasing news and deadlines for the local paper, I had found solace in the quiet charm of its meandering waters and rocky bluffs. Even in retirement, I couldn't resist the urge to document its beauty with my trusty Nikon. That evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the valley in hues of gold and copper, I found myself perched on the bluffs near Taylor's Falls, camera in hand. It started like any other outing. I was snapping shots of the river's surface, the way the sunlight danced on the ripples. There were kayakers in the distance, and a pair of bald eagles soaring overhead, a scene as tranquil as any postcard. But as I adjusted my lens to frame the shoreline, something caught my eye. A shadow moved beneath the water, broad and sluggish, like some ancient creature stirring from the depths. At first, I thought it might be a sturgeon. The St. Croix River had its legends of massive prehistoric fish, and I'd heard the tall tales often enough to entertain the idea. But this was different. The shadow wasn't swimming. It was lingering, pulsating with a rhythm that reminded me of a heartbeat. I lowered the camera and squinted down at the water, trying to make sense of it. Then the lights began. At first, it was just a flicker, like a firefly trapped underwater. But soon the glimmers multiplied, morphing into a symphony of colors. Reds, blues, greens, and purples swirled together, casting an otherworldly glow that rippled outwards like rings in a pond. My heart thudded in my chest as I raised the camera again, snapping wildly. My hands were trembling so much that I cursed myself for not bringing the tripod. Through the lens, I tried to focus on the anomaly, but it was shifting, evolving. The shadow wasn't a shadow anymore. It was rising. I don't know how to describe it in words that would make sense to you. It wasn't solid, not like a boat or a fish. It was a presence, a luminous, breathing thing that seemed to defy every law of nature I thought I understood. The colors intensified as it broke the surface, hovering there for a moment like it was testing the air. The sound was faint but undeniable, a hum, low and resonant, vibrating in my chest like the distant echo of a tuning fork. I snapped more photos, desperate to capture this unexplainable moment. But the more I watched, the less distinct the thing became. It began to ascend, slowly twisting and folding into itself as it climbed. The lights danced across the cliffs and trees, casting rainbow shadows that felt almost alive. It wasn't a rocket's sharp trajectory or the chaotic tumble of debris. It was deliberate, almost graceful. I wanted to yell, to call out to someone, anyone, to witness what I was seeing. But the valley was silent. It was just me, the river, and this entity. As it rose higher, its form became indistinct, like a cloud of vapor or smoke. And then, as quickly as it appeared, it was gone, dissolved into the sky without a trace. I stood there for what felt like hours, my camera heavy in my hands. Eventually, I lowered it and reviewed the shots. My heart sank. The images were beautiful: golden sunsets, rippling water, the peaceful expanse of the valley. But there was nothing unusual. No sign of the lights or the entity. Just sunlight on the water and wisps of clouds. By the time I reached my truck, the sky was dark, the stars just beginning to show. I couldn't shake the feeling that what I'd seen wasn't meant to be captured. Not in photographs, anyway. It was as if the entity had chosen to reveal itself to me alone, and now it was my burden to tell the tale. Back home, I sat at my desk, staring at a blank page. The words didn't come easily. How do you describe the indescribable? How do you convince people to believe in something you can't prove? I wasn't even sure I believed it myself. But as I began to type, the story flowed, imperfect and raw. I left out the word UFO. That felt too sensational, too reductive. Whatever this was, it wasn't an object. Not in the sense we understood. It was something more. I titled it "The Glow Below, A Photographer's Tale," and I sent it off to the paper, knowing full well it would raise eyebrows. Maybe some would laugh, calling me senile or eccentric. Others might dismiss it as a tall tale. But I didn't care. I knew what I saw. And now, so would they. Well, that wraps up tonight's collection of 5 scary UFO stories. I hope you enjoyed them. Please like and subscribe, comment below, and have a good night. Night-night.